Hey, I am Matthias of Regenerations Creations, and today I want to go over the races of my story. In total, there are 5 elven races and 3 new races. They are considered to be the only sentient races on the world, the planet of my world. This video will only go over the first and the last race of elf in terms of chronology. And so the first race, in the far distant past, the world was fairly empty. Most of the planet was covered in water, and there were a few aquatic species. Early forms of terrestrial life, including plants and amphibious creatures, began along the coastal regions. In the dead center of the supercontinent, there was a wellspring of power. Legends say that from this wellspring, the Primordial Elves emerged. But it could also be the case that an early form of life went into the well and then was transformed into the Primordial Elves. So these Primordial Elves were around 7 feet tall, gray-skinned, and black-haired. And I haven't created any actual characters yet. And then in the actual timeline of my story, they're all dead, basically. But I was thinking of giving them ancient Sumerian names. So like Ninshuel, Darishe, Amarenzu. I think it gives like a nice like ancient mystical feel to them. So the Primordial Elves are a neutral aspected race that could harness the powers of order and chaos at will. What their minds thought up soon became reality around them. To modern life in the story, they would be more akin to a race of gods. They are biologically immortal, growing to maturity and then ceasing to age. They saw themselves as the owners and caretakers of the world and traveled around creating new forms of life, as well as helping the existing flora and fauna to evolve and adapt. They also created grand architecture by shaping stone and living material with their magics. After centuries, they had built grand cities across the supercontinent, and a diversity of life was flourishing like never before. It was the first golden age of the elves. They understood and worshipped the universe as their grand creator and god, and spent much time stargazing to find the divine will of the universe. Above the great central wellspring, they built the Great Central Pyramid, and this channeled and amplified their magics, as well as the magics of the underlying wellspring. So atop this great pyramid was an astral observatory. From here, the astrologians would divine meaning from the movements of the heavens. It was then that they noticed a gigantic meteor filled with chaos energy, and it was hurtling right towards them. This pending catastrophe divided the race for the first time. Many of them saw this as the will of the universe, coming to destroy them because their time was simply up. Others saw this as a great test of will, thinking it was their job to destroy this asteroid and prove their power to the universe. And yet others saw this as an inescapable inevitability and something they simply had to find a way to endure. The ones who embraced destruction spent all of their time feasting and frolicking, caring for nothing but pleasure until their inevitable demise. The ones who chose to endure went underground, carving out the vast system of tunnels and caverns that became the Underdark. And lastly, the ones who wanted to destroy the asteroid put all their efforts into the Great Central Pyramid. They saw that the asteroid was made up of chaos energy, so they decided to nullify it by coalescing order energy into the pyramid. Once ready, they shot this energy out and hit the asteroid. It did break it up, but didn't stop its fragments from impacting the world. Many chunks landed in the oceans and caused huge tidal waves and flooding. One big piece hit the northern part of the supercontinent. Its impact threw up massive amounts of dust into the atmosphere and drowned the world in darkness. Also, the mass concentration of order energy had gathered at the Great Central Pyramid, throwing much of the center of the supercontinent into a kind of stasis, because in my world, order is akin to passivity. Now, with a nexus of chaos in the north, where the meteor impacted, and a nexus of order in the center, the energies of the world were no longer flowing in harmony as they once did. Much of the life on the surface of the planet was wiped out in a matter of years. The primordial elves who survived were the group that went underground and created the Underdark. After a century underground, many of them decided to return to the surface, and many more decided to stay underground, since they had carved out a happy existence there and thought that that's where the universe wanted them to stay. The surface dwellers now had the daunting task of rebalancing the energies of the world and rebuilding the diversity of life. They traveled the land in search of species that remained, as well as mapping out new ley lines and places of power across the supercontinent. It was then that they found the eastern, western, and southern places of power. And at these new locations, they built new step pyramids. From these pyramids, they started creating new forms of life and rebuilding the world. As the energy coalesced within each pyramid, the primordial elves brought forth the three demigods. So now we're going to talk about the last race of elf, the evil elves. And these are really just corrupted primordial elves. So that's why the primordial elves are like the first and the last race of elves to be made. So when the primordial elves constructed the three-step pyramids and birthed the demigods, Sol Invicta, Selene Meraki, and Dayar Hale, another was born underground beneath the northern asteroid impact. This demigod was called Tenebris Deus, meaning dark god in Latin, and he is the manifestation of the aspect of destructive chaos. Tenebris Deus was deep in the Underdark, far lower than any elf had ventured. Down there were some species of flora and fauna that were very ancient from the beginning of life on the planet. He twisted and corrupted them, giving them horrifying new forms and creating the squid-like Illithid race. From here, he corrupted some of the primordial elves through dark dreams and visions. He then waged war and eventually corrupted all of the primordial elves of the Underdark. And then with them bolstering his forces, rose to take over the surface world during the Second Age. The corrupted elves became known as feral elves, or Ma'aliye, and they are now manifestations of the aspect of destructive chaos instead of being neutral beings, as the primordial elves were before. They are the opposite of wood elves in many ways. Like the wood elves, they are covered in fur, but the Ma'aliye's fur is always a dark black, or the ones that were later banished to the far north have become white-furred. They would be the tallest elf if they were able to stand up erect, but they walk on all fours. So in my mind, they're like a mix between Neanderthals and gorillas. Like gorillas, they have massive front arms and they walk on their knuckles. So the primordial elves were highly intelligent, but this corrupted form, they are still cunning and intelligent, but more akin to an apex predator than to a high elf. However, the greatest Ma'aliye still possess all of their previous intelligence and can in fact shape back into a primordial elf, or even impersonate other elves. Like the wood elves, they possess telepathy, but in a much more savage way. They can send feelings of fear and dread into the minds of others and sow seeds of discord. They also mind meld with each other, so that a pack of Ma'aliye working together become more akin to one beast with multiple bodies. But since they are destructive chaos aspected, this mind meld is very intense and more akin to a mental domination than to a cooperation. In practice, this means that it's almost impossible for more than 4 Ma'aliye to be in a mind meld together. If it gets bigger than that, then the individuals start to rip the bond apart. So I based part of this about the Ma'aliye off a nature documentary I watched about large cats. I'm pretty sure it was like pumas of South America. The females live and hunt alone unless they have their babies, which they train to hunt and then abandon once they're old enough. The males often pair up to hunt, living in packs of 2 to 4, usually. So it's against the biology of these predators to live in any group larger, because then they would have to start killing each other because they're competing for resources. So it's the same with these feral elves, the Ma'aliye. They're so destructive and dominating that unless they are being herded and directed by either a Ma'aliye matriarch or by Tenebris Deus himself, they cannot stand to be near each other in any large numbers. Now I'm going to talk about their magic. So a lot of the magic is subtle, but they're not going to be standing there casting spells. But it's also highly effective at causing disorder and making them better predators. They can cast silence, either on an individual or on an area, meaning that like a spellcaster can't speak his words of power, and officers can't give orders. And then they can also cast deafness on an individual or an area, which means their prey can't hear them sneaking up on them, nor can they communicate with each other. And then a group of Ma'aliae together can take some time and bring darkness on an area. They can also do a psychic roar that causes terror and demoralization. And then lastly, they can become enraged. In this enraged state, their bodies grow and become suffused with void energy, adding magical damage to their attacks and bolstering their defense, but also making them blindly attack everything and anything in their path, even each other. Since they are knuckle walkers like gorillas, they cannot use traditional weapons and tools, and since they're so destructive, they wouldn't have the proclivity to make them, even if they could use them. But Tenebris Deus will have outfitted some armor and weapons for his most powerful Ma'aliae. They would have curved blades that attach to their forearms. So I was thinking of standing like a gorilla, and they would have like the blades coming out, going on sideways, so they could deliver like devastating backhanded swipes. And they could also have like similarly attached shields to the front of their arms. Yep, so that would be their magic and their weapon system. Mostly they're just kind of like ferocious fighters with that subtle magic. So, as I said earlier, the most powerful Ma'aliae retain their intelligence level they were before as Primordial Elves, and they can shapeshift back into elf form. They use this to take over, like, impersonate leaders, take over areas, and weaken the Elven kingdoms before major assaults by Tenebris Deus. So that is the first and last of the Elven races, the Primordial Elves that were corrupted into the evil Ma'aliae. My next two videos will go over the rest of the races of my story. But until then, thank you for watching and have a great day.